There's one for you, 19 for me. 'Cause I'm the tax man. Yeah, I'm the tax man.
We are back with George Runner on Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio Newstalk 1180. George, I have to tell you, that's Clay's sense of humor, not mine. Okay,
that's an old Beatles song, isn't it?
It's before your and my time, right?
But
that's right. My parents told me about that.
Yeah.
But it's current today.
Yes, it is.
It is always current.
Unfortunately, I had a question for you. I was going through the website. That's actually a great website that the Board of Equalization has, and they were talking about the tax revenue. I guess the last accounting year was 2009, and it mentioned there was a decrease of 10% in the sales tax revenue, but yet property tax revenue had gone up 5%. So, one of my favorite sayings of yours is, when you were in the Senate and in the Assembly, is that we don't have a spending problem. We don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
Well, are we going to get to the point, looking at these graphs I noticed on the website, are we going to get to the point where the revenue is going to start decreasing to the point where it's just going to really add to the problem that we have?
Well, it's kind of interesting, actually. The last projections, and again, this is now the 1st of May. They're counting the income tax coming in right now from April 15th, and actually we're up overall tax receipts right now for all taxes are up about $2 billion over what was projected in this current year budget. Now, you take that on top of a $26 billion deficit, which is now about half now, $13 billion after the changes. It doesn't fill up the hole, but it shows that there is some movement at that point right now in regards to at least revenues that are coming in a little stronger than what was anticipated.
Wow, that's a surprise, George. So the revenue's actually increasing, not going down?
Right. There's some, but in general, sales taxes are still very troubling. Corporate income tax is down, but individual income tax is up right now. So, and again, it's hard to tell exactly what people make in terms of their tax decisions as to what drives that. But the bottom line is, right now, the state is about $2 billion up than what was projected in the current budget.
Wow, incredible.
But again, which would be really good if you actually had a balanced budget.
Right. Yeah. Sure. We'd be making money.
So in essence, it means that they don't have to cut quite as much. Mm-hmm. In regards to that. So that's where we are. But I agree. The issue in regards to revenue and whether or not you have a revenue or spending problem. I mean, the fact is that the state just needs to adjust itself, just like every family does when revenues don't come in as strong as they thought. And it's interesting. One of the big roles that we have in the Board of Equalization is the issue of hearings and trying to deal with tax disputes when it is that a taxpayer feels that they were unjustly dealt with when some aspect of taxes. And we deal with, we have hearings and tax disputes, whether it's income tax or sales tax or some of these special taxes. And taxpayers have the ability to come right to the Board of Equalization and talk about why they feel like they don't owe this particular tax. And that's an important process for which people to tell their story, so that you just don't have a bureaucrat who, ultimately says, we don't care, we're going to come get you anyhow.
So when they come before the Board of Equalization, or your board, who are they going before?
The 5 members.
Oh, they are.
So that would be the 4 directly elected and the state controller. I can tell you that, unfortunately, there's some wins there for taxpayers. The board is made up of what I look at as kind of 2 conservatives and 3 folks that sometimes think the money belongs to the government and not to the people. I think that oftentimes then gets reflected in those decisions. We've got some, to me, some pretty sad stories of, individuals who, all of a sudden had a tax liability, which, when I looked at it and as they told their story, I didn't believe that they had one. They should be relieved of the tax liability. And sometimes we win those, and most of the times we don't, though, on a 3-2 vote.
George, it's a good thing that yours is an elected position, because if it wasn't, I doubt that you would have got appointed under Jerry Brown.
Well, that's precisely why it is. I think that the idea of the elected Board of Equalization is so important. Otherwise, you're right. That's exactly what you would get. You end up with an organization that's under the governor, and then oftentimes, then depending upon how that happens, who the governor is, you end up with this philosophy that's, to me, oftentimes very anti-taxpayer. There's another issue to that, and that is because we're in districts, we do a lot of constituent work. And what I try to tell people, and tell people now on the radio here, is that what I need people to do is help us know about your tax difficulty or your tax challenges prior to getting in the hearing process. Let us help you handle the challenges that you've got that you have there, and then we can help you maybe deal with that on a constituent basis rather than somehow a formal hearing process. And quite frankly, we've got some good successes with that. We had a constituent over there in the Bakersfield area that all of a sudden there was a law change a couple of years ago that required certain kinds of taxpayers, income taxpayers, required them to have to file by e-filing. Couldn't just file, mail in your money or drop it off or whatever you would do. You had to actually e-file. Well, the problem with that is that somehow this couple didn't understand that. And so they went ahead and made their payment just like normal, mailed it in. It was a significant payment, and lo and behold, they got a penalty because they didn't mail it, because they didn't e-file. And so they called our office, actually worked with Shannon Grove, and they called, and Assembly Member Grove, and we began looking at it, and we were able to get that penalty waived, not only for them, but everybody else who filed on time, but just didn't happen to file the way that the FTB, the State Franchise Tax Board, wanted them to file. And so that was the kind of win that we were able to get for a constituent right there in Kern.
Great. Our guest by phone is former state senator and Board of Equalization member George Runner.
George, you said that if we had an issue, we should come to you. Well, I have an issue, being a businessman with 80 special taxes and all the other taxes. What we need to do is reduce taxes in this state, not increase them.
Absolutely. I believe the Californians are overtaxed, that's for sure.
George, I didn't realize that you had anything to do with audits and everything. So anything I may have said to you over the years, I apologize for.
And I'll apologize in advance.
Speaking about state issues, Sharon, your wife, is back in the state Senate representing Antelope Valley.
Yes, Sharon represents the 17th Senate District now. When I ran, I ran midterm in my final term in the state Senate, and created then a vacancy with a special election. And so Sharon, about 8-9 weeks ago, ran for that. There was an election, and she was successfully elected. So yes, she serves in the state Senate right now.
George, can you take a couple of minutes and just explain Proposition 13?
Sure. You mean the property tax issue?
Yes.
Yeah. The whole concept of that is when voters did that, what happened, what was the driver of that, is the fact that the concern was that property tax values, or the values of houses going up, property, was driving people out of their homes, because people on fixed incomes all of a sudden have large increases on their property values, and yet have their income doesn't go up accordingly, and as a result they have an asset there that they can no longer afford, not because they couldn't afford it when they bought it, but they couldn't afford it because of the ongoing value that the property was increasing, even though that was not necessarily something they could control. And so, the voters then were very concerned about that. And California then was the first state to create this idea of a cap, a 1% cap, then on the value of your property. So that the concept is that when you buy the property, that's the level to which you're taxed at. There's a small amount to which that can be increased each year, and then it's reassessed then when that property then is resold again. Quite frankly, it's been interesting because a lot of people whine and cry about the fact that that's somehow taking money away from the government. But in reality, what it's been is very helpful especially during this time when properties are decreasing. Because just imagine how governments would be happening right now if they were maximizing their appraisals of property and spending all that money during that high time, during that peak time of property values, and then all of a sudden they had to actually go out there and decrease everybody's property values because everybody would have had it because everybody were being assessed at the highest amount. It would have been terrible for local governments and for the state for that matter. So it's actually leveled the amount of taxes that come in through property and makes it far less volatile.
Which is a great idea. When we get back, George, let's talk a little bit about some state issues, okay?
Sure.
We're having a conversation with former state senator and Board of Equalization member George Runner on Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio Newstalk 1180.